So we're going to talk about growth hormone, okay? This is going to be our sort of exemplary hormone from the anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary gland produces a whole bunch of hormones. So if you look at the list that I have here on the left, say you have growth hormone releasing hormone that is produced by hypothalamus, right? So this GHRH gets delivered to APG. What happens in APG? APG in response to this produces growth hormone. TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, gets delivered to APG. APG produces what? Thyrotropin. Okay? And it goes on and on and on. So what I decided to do this semester, we're not going to talk about each and every hormone of anterior pituitary because it makes no sense kind of without the connection to the overall systemic response that this hormone participates in, okay? So if I will tell you, okay, your anterior pituitary produces growth hormone, thyrotropin, corticotropin, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, and prolactin. What are you going to take out of it? Like, oh, okay, you just listed a whole bunch of hormones that are kind of, senseless. So instead we're going to focus on functional meaning, and we're going to come back to APG over and over again. Okay? So we're going to start with the growth hormone. Now you may remember that in the very beginning of today's class, I mentioned that overwhelming majority of hormones regulated through the negative feedback loop, right? So same is true for growth hormone. And this is the beauty of hormonal regulation. If you know the stimulus, you can figure out the response. You understand what I'm saying? You can figure out the effect of the hormone. If you know that insulin is stimulated by elevated blood glucose, you can immediately figure out that insulin is essential to lower it. Okay, and if I tell you that, say aldosterone is, the effect of aldosterone is to increase the sodium in the blood. You can think, aha, so low sodium will stimulate aldosterone. So for growth hormone, I'm not going to disclose what the stimulus is yet. We're going to figure it out together, okay? We're going to go over the regulation and the effects, and then we'll patch it back to the stimulus. So it all starts in hypothalamus, which produces growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH. Okay? Now this hormone travels through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system and enters anterior pituitary gland. And what happens here? APG releases growth hormone. Okay? What do you think is the overall effect of the growth hormone? Really? Growth hormone. What is the effect of growth hormone? Growth. Yes, that's it. Stimulates growth, right? Now, in order to grow, you need two things. You need building blocks, right? And you need energy. Does that make sense? So let's start with building blocks first. What is the main structural molecule of the human body? Structural, that's important. What are we made of most? I mean, I know water, sure, water, yeah, but besides water? Huh? No, molecules. Like, what are we made of? There are four kinds of biological molecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. What are we made of?
Proteins.
Bingo, proteins. We're mostly proteins, okay? So building blocks for protein synthesis are amino acids, right? Protein synthesis happens in the cells. So the first direct effect of growth hormone, really important, is increased amino acid uptake into the cells. 2 out of 10 question. Increased uptake from where? Amino acids get into the cells. From where? From where? What carries stuff around the body? Blood, yeah. So uptake from the blood into the cells. Does that make sense? Now, keep it in mind, that's one thing. So what does it do? It increases the removal of amino acids from the blood into the cells. Okay? Now you need energy, right? So, 2 energy sources. 2 types of molecules that provide energy. Bingo. And number 2? Lipids. So you need a lot of carbs and a lot of lipids in the blood. So you have elevated blood glucose and elevated blood fatty acids. Okay? Does that make sense to you all? Elevate the blood glucose, elevated blood fatty acids. Now, without any further ado, these are direct effects of growth hormone. Let's start figuring out the stimuli. So if the effect is increased fatty acids in the blood, what's going to be the stimulus?
Decrease levels.
Yes. If the effect is elevated blood glucose, what's going to be the stimulus?
Decrease.
Now, a little bit harder, just marginally harder. If the effect is to take amino acids from the blood into the cells, what's the stimulus? You have to take an extra step. When you take amino acids from the blood, what happens to the amino acid levels in the blood? It goes down. So essentially the effect is lower amino acid concentration in the blood. So the stimulus will be? Say again?
Higher.
Higher amino acid concentrations in the blood. So all of this will initiate the growth hormone production, right? I found a new question that I ask students in my classes, which is this semester. Does it sound very like basic and foundational, what we just discussed? I want to know, it's not a joke, I want an honest answer. Does it sound like fundamental, basic, conceptual? Does it? Does it? Yeah, sure. Does it sound boring? You don't have to be nice. Yeah, I know, it does. Now, here's the thing. Look at this picture here. A person with low blood fatty acids, low blood glucose, and a shit ton of amino acids. What this person just did. I'm trying not to make it boring. They went to the gym. They worked out. While they're working out, they lowered their blood fatty acids and glucose. They used all that energy. Does that make sense? And then after the workout, they had a protein shake. And that immediately stimulated the growth hormone production which stimulates, as an indirect effect, the muscle growth. And that's our next step. So, okay, so indirect effect of growth hormone is mediated by the liver. Okay? So growth hormone acts on the liver, which releases so-called insulin-like growth factors, IGFs. Okay? So far makes sense? And these insulin-like growth factors essentially stimulate protein synthesis, cell division, muscle and bone growth. Are you with me so far? So this is your indirect effect. And it's called indirect because growth hormone does not result in this directly. It goes through the intermediary, through the liver, which releases insulin-like growth factor. Does that make sense? 2 out of 10 question. Are those hormones? Yeah. Is liver an endocrine organ? Yeah. Is it primary endocrine organ? No, it's not. It's secondary. We're good so far? One last bit that we always have to remember. For every hormone, you have to establish a proper negative feedback loop. We kind of established it here. So you have all of this, you end up with all of this, right? But it's kind of nice to have an extra safety switch. And for the most part, for the most hormones, there is a safety switch. Some hormone down the road, down the cascade, will inhibit the beginning of the cascade. And in this case, IGFs will inhibit growth hormone and GHRH. Does that make sense, the whole idea? Okay? They will also, IGFs also will increase growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Okay, so GHIH will go up. In other words, now this is something that I like to do during the conversation about endocrine system, and if you can do that, what we're going to do now, you will be able to easily answer most of the questions about endocrine. So when we say inhibition, essentially mean the levels of the corresponding hormones go low, okay? So let me ask you this. If you will artificially, whatever, I don't really care how, but artificially increase the levels of IGF, you take a syringe full of insulin-like growth factors and you stick it into somebody's arm and you increase the levels of IGF, what's going to happen to the levels of GHRH and growth hormone? They're going to go down. Exactly, yes. What if we will increase the levels of these two artificially? What happens to IGF? Yeah, it's going to go up. That makes sense? And as it goes up, technically speaking, it will inhibit this stuff back, right? So that's your teeter-totter. That's your negative feedback. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so I'm going to ask you basically same question over and over when we talk about other hormones. And I want you to feel comfortable thinking about, okay, I increase this hormone, what happens down the line, or in the beginning? Okay? Again, I know, it's boring. Now let me ask you this. Can we use growth hormone? I'm not asking should we, I'm asking can we use growth hormone as the performance enhancement drug? Can we use it as a doping? Sure can. Okay? Now, first of all, just FYI, not for the exam, it doesn't work. I mean, the benefits are pretty minimal. I read a few studies. Maybe it provides some benefits. Now, let's take a look at the downside of it. So if you, now we're gonna talk endocrine system again. You take a syringe full of growth hormone, okay, does that make sense? And you stick it into a person's vein, and GH levels skyrocket. Tell me the actual physiological outcomes. Look at this first. What's going to happen to the person's blood glucose? If you give them a lot of growth hormone, what's going to happen to their blood glucose?
Spike.
It's going to spike. And if you keep giving them growth hormone, it's going to stay high for a long time, right? What it's going to result in?
Diabetes.
Yep. That's one complication. You can induce diabetes, right? It's going to happen to blood fatty acids. Yeah, they're going to increase. That's called hyperlipidemia. Hyperlipidemia usually stimulates atherosclerosis. That makes sense? That's a real consequence of the use of growth hormone and the performance enhancement drug. On top of that, what's going to happen to their muscles? They're going to grow. I'm not asking any hard, I'm going to tell you when the question is hard. I will tell you this, but those are simple ones. So muscles will grow. Which muscles do you know? Which 3 types of muscles do you know, people? Cardiac, smooth, and skeletal, right? So let's abandon skeletal. That's kind of a point to grow it up. What about cardiac? If cardiac muscle grows, is that good? It's called cardiac hypertrophy, and it's not a good hypertrophy, okay? So it's been shown that people who use GH as a performance enhancement drug suffer from type 2 diabetes, atherosclerosis, cardiac hypertrophy, all of this. That make sense? It's not too popular, I believe it's just because it's too freaking expensive. Okay? Questions on growth hormone? Good? Okay. So